Good morning, students. It is Monday, April the 10th, and we had a great time at AACS National Competition. Our students did really well. The Readers Theater made it to the final round, the top 6 in the nation, and so it was a great time. I am back in town. However, I have a daughter that has this strep throat now, and so we took her to the hospital yesterday and got her all squared away with her medication, and Lord willing, she'll be back tomorrow, so I should be able to see you tomorrow. But I wanted to still get a lesson in where you're listening to me teach, and so if you'd get your notes out and copy down what I'm talking about, and hopefully get you going so you can do today's assignment. I wanted to review with you how to evaluate an expression that has a square root. And so we did these before spring break, and so I wanted to review this with you. What you're going to do, if I can find my pen, is you're going to take the square root of b squared, and b is a -2, and so we're going to put in parentheses -2 quantity squared, so you just substitute what b is in there, and then minus 4, which is given in the expression, times a, which is 1, times c, which is a -3. And so then once we've substituted all the values in, now we just simplify. -2 squared would be 4, minus 4 times 1 would be a -4, and -4 times -3 would be a +12. So make sure you multiply first here before you start doing any addition or subtraction. Last step is to add 4 plus 12, and you get the square root of 16, which is equal to 4. Today's lesson now, you can begin writing these notes down, and at any time you can stop the video if you need some extra time before I move on. But in this lesson we're going to solve quadratic equations by finding square roots. Just a couple of things about quadratic equations. A quadratic equation in x is an equation that can be written in the standard form ax squared plus bx plus c is equal to 0. That's going to be the standard form. Remember, the way that you can tell an equation is quadratic is that it will have a variable squared. And always write that term first, the x squared term first, then the x term, then the constant, and set it equal to 0. Notice a in this expression, in this equation, can never equal 0. So that value right there in front of the x squared will never equal 0, because if it does, then there's not an x squared term. In this form, a is the leading coefficient. The number in front of x squared is what is going to be called the leading coefficient. So when I talk about that, what is the leading coefficient, or I'll make reference to it, it's always going to be the number that's in front of x squared. Okay, and then finally on this slide, in this lesson, in lesson 9.2 that we're studying today, we will find real number solutions of quadratic equations in the form ax squared plus c is equal to 0. And the difference between the first one and the type that we're studying today, if you'll notice, there is no bx term in this second form. So b is going to be 0, and it's going to eliminate the x term. So there's not going to be any x in the equation, just the x squared term. Okay, next, we're going to solve x squared equal to d by finding square roots. And so here are just some simple equations where you've got it says x squared is equal to 4. So in other words, we're trying to figure out what two numbers when squared will equal 4. And without even doing any solving, hopefully you realize that 2 squared is 4 and -2 squared is 4. So what you actually did was you took the square root of x squared and the square root of 4. And then there's always two roots. Both roots are involved. You take the square root of both sides and then make sure you do the positive root and the negative root. And that's how we got x is equal to plus or minus 2. And that's how we got this answer of 2 and -2. For the second one, we're going to do the exact same thing. This time you're going to take the square root of x squared is equal to plus or minus the square root of 5. And since 5 is not a perfect square root, your answer will just be as is, plus or minus the square root of 5. So for number 2, you would write a final answer there. That's just so you can see that if it's not a perfect square root, then you can leave it in a perfect square root form. X squared is equal to 0. I'm just going to do the square root of both sides right here, and you'll notice that x is just equal to 0. There will just be one answer. Whereas with numbers 1 and 2, you had 2 answers whenever you have a positive number to the right of the equal sign. When x squared is equal to 0, you'll just have one answer. And then this last one here, when you take the square root of x squared is equal to plus or minus the square root of a negative 1, that's not possible. There's no real number solution, so x does not have a solution. Actually, let me erase that. Okay, and let's do this instead. Let's just do, just write no solution, no real solution, because you cannot find a square root of a negative number. No real solution. Sorry, it's a little bit sloppy there. I'm writing with my finger. All right, now let's go over how to solve equations that have an x squared term and a constant but no x term. And so we're just going to solve them just like we would if we were solving for x. So first thing, you're going to add 48 to both sides. Just be doing these problems with me so that you have some examples to look at. And once you add 48 to both sides, cancels the 48. So 3x squared is equal to 48. And then divide both sides by 3, because you divide by the coefficient, the lead coefficient that's in front of the x squared term. That way we cancel. 3 over 3 cancels to 1, and you're just left with x squared. And 48 is divisible by 3, and it goes in there 16 times. And then last step is take the square root of both sides, make sure you take plus or minus here, and your final answer, x, is equal to plus or minus 4. Alright, the second one here on this slide, you're going to do it the same way you did number 1. I'll let you get started. The problem reads 4x squared minus 15 is equal to 0. So I'm going to work it while you do. You go ahead, and then you can look up and see if you get the same answer that I do. Alright, on number 2, you should have added 15 to both sides. You got 4x squared is equal to 15. Divide both sides by 4, and you solve for x squared. It equals 15 over 4. When you take the square root of both sides, it would be correct to say x is equal to the plus or minus the square root of 15 over 4. But remember, you can always split up the square root. So it can be the square root of 15, which stays on top, and then the square root of 4 does equal to. So there is your solution. That's what a lot of quadratic equation solutions are going to look like. The last one here, when you have a coefficient that's a fraction, multiply both sides by the reciprocal. So multiply both sides by 3 over 1, or just 3. And that way this all cancels. 3 over 1 times 1 over 3 cancels to 1. And you get x squared is equal to 9. And then take the square root of both sides. And it'll be x is equal to plus or minus 3. So that's how you do it. I wanted to show you one with fraction so that you knew how to do a fraction. Alright, go back through these. Make sure you write them down. If you have a question, maybe somebody next to you could answer the question that you have. And if you're understanding so far, you can always look back at the lesson as well. Here's your assignment for tomorrow. Page 461, numbers 1 through 20 all. Page 461, 1 through 20 all. Please do your work carefully. Write out the equations. Show the steps that you use to solve for x. and go back through this video if necessary. I will post it on Edmodo if you're needing while you're doing your homework tonight to look back at some of the examples and hopefully hear my explanation. Hopefully that will help you, and I'll see you in class tomorrow. Have a great day.